Let's talk about the day today. The 11th day of October is celebrated globally as the International Day of the Girl Child, and we are going to have that conversation, joined now by Sylvia Maina, who's a regional gender statistics and communications specialist at UN Women, and Joshua Musyimi, who's a program specialist for gender statistics at UN Women. Sylvia and Joshua, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Latiff.
How are you doing?
Very well, thanks.
You're doing well.
Happy International Day of the Girl Child.
Yes. Happy International Day.
Karibuni sana. Well, you're sitting on the hot seats of the Situation Room. We normally have one, but every time if we have an extra guest, we hit up the other one. They're warm enough, right?
Very nice.
Very
Yes,
good.
they are.
Karibuni sana. We will talk about this. We'll get to understand the importance of the International Day of the Girl Child and what we mean by girl child and all. But City will welcome you with the day's proverb. Where are our proverbs coming from this week?
This is the final day of our proverbs from the Kingdom of Morocco. Kingdom. By the way, this is a genuine kingdom. None of these ceremonial things. And the king is not ceremonial either. He's a king with power. Yes, this king is the commander of the faithful, like head of the church. He is commander of the Moroccan armed forces. He is head of the Supreme Council of the judiciary. Every time I read this and I'm thinking, if the African leaders listen, they're just salivating and saying, why did we get democracy? Look at all this. Yes, but he chooses the prime minister from the political party that wins the election. He can remove and constitute ministries. He can also terminate parliament.
Oh, without notice?
He can terminate parliament.
Period.
Yes.
Total power.
Yes, and they have a population of 38 million. So we are more than them. Now, the proverb. They begin as neighbors and end up as mice. Okay?
They begin as neighbors and end up as mice. Sylvia,
Nice.
you were looking forward to today's
The
proverb.
proverb.
Yeah.
This must
There
be the
it
toughest
is.
one I've heard yet.
Sylvia,
Yes. I
sounds-
think
it sounds
he
like it's the
planned this
toughest
for
one.
us.
sounds like it's the toughest one, but maybe it's not.
They began as neighbors and ended up as mice.
Yeah. I think Joshua can already see what this means. Really hazard, I guess.
This one is tough.
Don't overthink it. You just say what comes to mind. The thing about the interpretation, you can't be wrong. It doesn't matter what you say.
Literature, eh?
Yes,
Yes.
I mean, it's like saying that what they're saying is that camels are walking backwards. I'll
This
say,
is
okay,
it.
Yeah.
if that's what you see, then that's fine.
That's fine.
Yes.
What City said, camels are walking backwards. That is the answer.
It's a tough one, is it?
Yeah,
a
they
tough
began
one.
as
Very
neighbors,
interesting.
ended up as mice.
Yeah? What do you think?
What do mice do? What are they
Mice
known for?
nibble, I guess.
Yes, they do. Do you invite them to nibble?
No.
They decide.
Yes.
Yes. And
You've
if,
got it?
And if there are plenty, then they actually become a nuisance.
A nuisance.
I agree. I see it.
What do you see, Yankee?
I see it.
Uh-huh.
I see
So what's
it.
your interpretation?
You can invite them and they come in as friends, but then things can turn around and they become bothersome instead, drag you down, steal from you, tear your clothes apart, leave you miserable.
Or they start off by asking for salt.
Yeah.
Jirani kuna chumvi? Jirani unga umeisha.
Then it's sugar.
Kibrit, sugar.
And your skuma is now on the line.
Yes, exactly. But then
Eventually
jirani,
everything.
Eventually
Yeah,
everything.
you
And then jirani nipe lift.
jirani, nimesikia harufu ya nyama ikangwa. Umebakisha kidogo.
Tunanukia hizo chapati.
Yeah, bas, you've got
Leo ni
it.
siku ya chapo.
Bas, you've got it.
Oh.
Wow, but that's a tough one, City.
Makes sense, doesn't it, though?
It does. Because best intentions sometimes don't take you where you intend. Eh?
Nice.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious. I want to hear from Joshua.
Indeed.
Really, when I look at it, I've no much idea. I'm a numbers person. Ask me how many mice were there. And I'll be able to,
I love that. And disaggregate them
Yes.
by sex.
and I'll tell you.
But this is an interesting proverb. If you grew up in the rural areas and you had friends whom you played with, was it unusual for you to eat at their house or for them to eat at your house?
So very normal.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It was very, very normal. It's been normal for the longest time. But what is of interest also, children knew where food was cooked better.
So they could give you intel. Huh?
So around meal times, they more or less head in that direction. Because they also know it is being cooked at their own house and they're not interested.
They're like, today's gathering. The neighbor has chapo. It's a no-brainer.
People start heading there. Okay. Today is the International Day of the Girl Child. What's that, Sylvia? What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that. First of all, for even marking this day, because I think it's one of those days that often passes unknown. We all know International Women's Day, but International Day of the Girl sometimes surprises a lot of people. So basically, it's a day to just evaluate where girls are. Globally, of course, regionally, in the sub-region of Eastern Southern Africa, and now, of course, in Kenya, just to assess what are some of the gains that have been made in girls' empowerment, gender equality, of course, that affects girls as well, not just women, because it takes a girl to make a woman, right? So it also looks at some of the challenges, maybe, that they've faced. But I think we like to start with gains, perhaps, before we go into all the complaints, if I can say, of what's not being done for girl child. And this year, the theme, as you may be aware, is looking at hope and future. Like, basically, it's an optimistic kind of theme. So what does the future hold for girls globally and in Kenya as well?
You know, City loves music. And there's a group that he likes called The Temptations. And they sang the song My Girl. He keeps singing that song.
Nice.
So
From
who's
the
a girl?
80s. From the 80s, huh?
When you say girl, how do we define when you say girl child? Is there a universal definition of girl child?
Yeah, so for me, I'd define that as female under 18, for sure. You know, there are a lot of reports and documents you read where you see women between the age of 15 and 24. And I always cringe because from the minute we start calling a 15-year-old woman, it has all sorts of connotations, right? It normalizes some things which should not be normal, like child marriage, for example. Yeah, at least at risk of getting ahead of myself. But I think between 5 and 18 for me is what I would call a girl. I think from the statistical view, maybe Joshua can give some more insights, but 5 and below, I think we would consider that still in the very let me say infancy stage. Not really infancy, but you know, not really a girl yet, if I can call, because under 5s are classified a little bit differently. And even when you look at UN agencies, there are certain agencies that really focus on under 5, for example.
I think depending on what you want to analyze, but what Eric has asked about girls, yes, we'll look at those who are below 18. But depending on some of the analysis we do, like if we are interested on some of the vices like early child marriage and all that, then we are looking at even lower age groups. When we talk about issues of early pregnancies, then we go up to 19. We're looking at the age of 15 to 19. So it depends on what topic or what discussions we are putting on the table. But basically what Sylvia said, under 18, these are the girls.
Okay. If we just look at it broadly, because we're looking at the girl's vision for the future, and of course we're talking about making every woman and girl count in today's conversation, what are the main challenges that these girls between 5 and 18 face that would hamper their development and proper growth into their adulthood, into their life?
I'll say that in Kenya, we are looking at what we are calling the triple threat. And the triple threat here, we are talking about teenage pregnancies, we are talking about gender-based violence, we are looking at HIV, among some of the threats, or, you know, that will hamper the full growth to their potential of young girls. Yeah.
You know, when you talk about the understanding, let me revise that question. Why the focus on the girl child?
I'll say the girl child has been disadvantaged. Let me use a better word, at risk. vulnerable. You can use those type of words to, explain the question you are asking, because they are at a disadvantaged position compared to the boys. And that's why we are talking about the girl child mainly. Yeah.
And this disadvantage, is it something that's systemic? Is it something that is cultural? Is it something that for the longest time was considered a norm, and then with the time and understanding and exposure, it has been seen as a disadvantage?
Yes, I would say it started as a norm, as a cultural norm. When we grew up, myself and you, and probably Sylvia not there,
Akumbali kidogo.
yes,
Got
but,
Gen X, Mr.
so for us, we grew up, and once you are born, when you are a boy, when you are a girl, you are assigned some roles.
Yes.
A girl will be given, some utensils to play with.
Gender roles.
Kalungu, I think we used to call it.
Kalungu.
Yes. While the boys would be bought some cars as toys and all that. And it all started from there. And the boy was told that you cannot cry, you are a man. The girl as the other roles. So this is where the cultural norms started to impact on the girl child. And more to that, we'll find the girl was burdened with more household chores, washing utensils, collecting firewood, collecting water. And that pushed them to the disadvantage I talked about. And that was perpetuated even when you go to school. In some of the communities, a few girls will be taken to school. If you are both a boy and a girl and the family is disadvantaged, they will opt to take the boy to school, leave the girls behind. After 15, then you are married off. These are the disadvantages I'm talking about.
Those were the disadvantage. Are they still the disadvantage?
This is what we've been really trying to fight. And I mentioned about the triple threat. Probably there are more threats than the three ones I mentioned, because we've been trying to focus on, pushing for the girl education, sensitization of even the guardians, parents, to know that these people have equal opportunities, should be given equal opportunities. And from a gender perspective, we are saying, let's treat both the boy and the girl the same way. They should not be one disadvantaged than the other. Treat them as children. Take them to school. Empower them so that they meet their full potential.
Yeah. There's still a lot of that cultural hangover, if I can call it that. So yes, it was there traditionally, but even now in modern society, you still find families where there's both boys and girls. There are things the girl will be asked to do that the boy will not be asked to do, even in urban settings. Yeah, so like Joshua is saying, that perpetuated a lot of this, but there's also the perception of girls are being raised to go away. So, this brings a lot of issues. Inheritance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Inheritance. And that's why there's that choice of if there's boy and girl and you need to choose one to educate, you'll choose the boy because he's your legacy. But the girl, you're raising her and educating her to give to someone else. Can never be you, So you'd rather hold her back, and she's seen more as a resource. And I'll even go as far as saying it as a source of income. And when we look at economic shocks, because those are some of the issues that affect some of these behavior and practices. Yeah, if you have issues of like climatic and economic shocks, like there's a drought or there's a flood or there's a sudden global pandemic, and the economy is in flux, you'll find some girls now are being sold off more, like we saw that even during COVID, because things are difficult at home. Things are thick, as we would say, yeah? So you'd rather then give this girl up for marriage, get some income, and use that to sustain yourself. But the boy is seen more as long-term carrier of the family name. Right? And this is an issue, because I know in Kenya we always say that girls are over-empowered. And when we say that girl child is still disadvantaged, there's always the issue of you feminists, you're just trying to agitate for girls, right? And for us, even as UN Women, that's why we are so keen on incorporating male action, activism, voices, right? Like, it may be ironic to some that our gender statistics specialist for Kenya is a male, right? Our outgoing regional director for East and Southern Africa was also a male, right? But this is just as part of our he for she campaign, because some of these changes cannot happen with only women at the forefront, because this is a societal issue. And I like what President Obama said when he came in 2015 for the Global Economic Summit. He talked about how if half the population is women, and we know it's slightly just above half, maybe 51%, are held back, we cannot as a society pretend to be developing because you're trying to run with one hand tied behind your back. You can't be saying to be going forward, yet you're leaving half the population behind. So one of our mantras as the UN in general, and of course UN Women is privy to that, is leave no one behind. That's the philosophy for the Sustainable Development Goals. And so we'll keep harping on the girl child, not because we are anti the boy child, but because, first of all, let me clarify, gender is both boy and girl, man and woman.
Right.
That's something that I think needs to be demystified. But secondly, also, we emphasize with leave no one behind that we always start with the one who's furthest behind. Yeah, so if we're talking about persons with disabilities, we'd rather talk about them than regularly abled persons, right? Because those are the ones who need the most capacity. I know you understand the argument of equity versus equality.
I wanted to bring that up.
Isn't
I'm
it?
glad you've come. I was actually
Excellent.
waiting for you to do that.
Wonderful.
So yeah, we need to discuss that because the, example, and ugali is cooked at home. And there is how many boys in the house? 3 boys, 2 girls. But which is it? Like, you're going to cut it into all, sizes equally so that even though I do not want that size of ugali and I'll have a slice and I'm okay, that is equity. And which one is more achievable? Which one is more realistic? Are they all achievable at the same time? And what is UN's vision in that regard? Equity, equality. Because there's an argument. I just want a slice of ugali. Why are you fighting for me to have half of it like the boy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I love that analogy because in that case, clearly, like I'm a mother of boys, right? One is a preteen, the other one is a teen, way taller than me. But, you can't compare how they eat versus how girls eat. Okay. So if we were to have that exact scenario of the ugali, why would I insist that the girl eats the same amount as the boy, right? He needs more in that sense. Right? So for us as UN, we look at it as, yes, equality and equity are both important. Like UN Women is the agency for promoting gender equality and women's empowerment, right? So this is to say that neither of the genders should be left behind. Giving the example of education, for example, I think a lot has been done regionally, globally, even in Kenya, to make sure that girls have equal opportunity to access education. And we've actually found that they are more or less at par now in primary education. Yep. Even enrollment in secondary is more or less at par. In fact, in some countries, like is it Rwanda, maybe Botswana, I think South Africa, and Kenya as well, you might even find enrollment in secondary is higher for girls.
Enrollment.
Yes. Now, when we talk about other factors like transition, I know that's where you're going, right? You find, especially in mid-high school, the numbers may start to dip a little bit for girls. Okay. And I think if you ask yourself why, we can answer ourselves and say probably it's because they've now matured, in quotes. They've gone into puberty, started their menses, after 15. So now they're quote-unquote, in some cultures or in some perspectives, ready for marriage, right?
But then,
yes,
if these parents took their girl to school, then already we can see that their mindset is different, right? As opposed to those who are just, this girl, there's no point of me taking her to school. If a parent has paid school fees for their child through primary school, has started paying school fees for their child into secondary school, are you saying that this parent would easily discard all that and say, okay, you're in Form 3 now, you can get married? Is it that easy? Is it that it's a parent's decision?
Let me take that. It's not easy. Those who have now who've taken the decision to take their children to school, they would want to see them go through all the levels of education. But then other factors start to crop in. Like what Sylvia was saying, when they are 15 and above, now the other things like, some pets outside, I'll call them pets, sex pets, they'll start see them as now ready for other activities. Right. Let me not say that. Because, so that is what is affecting them. Then you see them drop out because they have either gotten pregnant or they have been, the motorbike riders, they are known now in the rural areas. They will entice them with a few 200 shillings, 100 shillings, and now they'll start competing with them. And now this leads now to another thing, then they drop out. That's what I want to say. But to the parent, he was determined to see this child go through. But I want to change it to the other side. We are seeing now more girls, push it through school, because of the sensitization which has been done. And even for those who now manage to finish school, get employment, these are the people who are supporting the families. They are more keen. The boys are now, I know we'll be discussing about the boy child later at some point, but we see the boy child sliding into now the challenges, the risks we are looking at for the girl child. Now the girl child is the one who is now becoming a bit, what do I say? Enabled.
And that brings in the question then, is it not possible for us to look at children as children and not look at children as gender? Because clearly looking at children as gender is leading to one. So it has previously been that you're looking at boys, and so you've empowered boys and disempowered girls. And then there's been a campaign to look at girls. So you've focused a lot on girls and sort of forgotten the boy. And now we are seeing a reversal. Even if you look at the comments that we are seeing right now, when you talk about International Day of the Girl Child, people are asking, is there ever an International Day for the boy child? Why now has the boy been so disempowered? What about the boy child? We look at it as gender. When you say girl, the boy comes in. Why not children?
Eric, if I pick what Sylvia said earlier, gender is about both boys, girls, women, and men. And therefore, we are trying to treat them. It's only when we start looking at the numbers that we start to see the discrepancies between the different sexes. So let's not use gender in this aspect, because gender is supposed to be, a level playground, But now when we look at the numbers, how they behave, then we start to see the small risks, the challenges one sex is facing. And these are the ones we are trying to address. So we are not saying that we should not address the challenges for the boy child. We should. But we should see no one is left behind. And that's a principle we are talking about here.
Are we discussing the symptoms or are we discussing the problem? Let me explain to you why I'm asking. A lot of what we say and what we consider retrogressive is very closely associated with traditionalism. And many communities who tend to be traditional also happen to be resource poor. If you look at our country and you look at places where people have held on to archaic traditions, as we call them, and which they consider to be fine, that is what seems to be the constant. What we call modern day development is scarce. The exposure that perhaps other places have is scarce. So they hold on to what they have held on to, because for change to occur, something must replace another.
Sure.
That is why it is called change. So the consequences are what we now see. Because if we talk about, say, the motorbike rider, motorbike revolutionized transportation in this country. It's a good thing. Who is the motorbike rider? Who ends up being the motorbike rider?
The boy
Yes,
child.
but from what background? What sort of person ends up? Is it the first choice when you're in school and you ask, what do you want to be? I want to be a motorbike.
What do you want to become?
Yes. I am simply saying, when you're enticed by 200 shillings, it means you regard it as a lot of money.
Sure.
Okay? If you're enticed by, what are these phones called? Whatever it is, these material things, it means it is something that you consider to be valuable. So, the problems that come about as a result of the traditional mindset has to do with a background where you are impoverished.
It's the role that poverty plays.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Siti, allow me to jump in. In fact, that is such an important point. Because it's about the root cause, like you've said. The issue is poverty. That's why I talked about even economic shocks. That's why I talked about global pandemics. There's also climatic shocks, which we know disproportionately affect girls and women, because if they're the ones going to fetch firewood and fetch water, then if there's an issue with drought and all that, then clearly they have to go longer distances in unsafe terrain, right? But poverty is one of the things, and that's where gender data really comes in, because there's something we call intersectionality, where where we look at the different factors. Like, is this someone, let's give a random example. This is a woman who's maybe a single parent, who is also, of course, let's use the example of the region Black, because we know they're racial or some certain tribes or from a certain region, like maybe an Asal region. Maybe this person also is out of work, right, is not educated. You know, those are different. Even the fact that she's a woman already puts her at a disadvantage based on the data that we have seen for some of those reasons that we've talked about. So even in Kenya, we've done gender data in a comprehensive poverty report that looked at some of these issues and what is affecting who and where and how. Yeah, how much money is in the pocket of the boy or the man versus the pocket of the girl and woman. And at UN Women, one of the thematic areas that we address, like Joshua and I are in a cross-cutting theme called gender statistics, which is where Making Every Woman and Girl Count program comes from, which is our flagship gender data and statistics program. Yeah, but we have other thematic areas that deal with elimination of violence against women. For example, there's women economic empowerment. Yeah, so we're looking at it in a multi-pronged approach. Right? Not just saying stop GBV, but we've noticed even anecdotal data shows that when you empower women and girls, incidences of GBV and even sexual GBV go down.
Yep.
Yeah, so these are all interlinked. So you're very right, Siti. It's a matrix, and we really try and hit all the areas, which is also why we work with grassroots organizations in Kenya and the region as well, because they have their hands and feet in the ground. Yeah, they can hear kwa ground what the ground is saying, as we say in Kenya.
And we'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll look at some of these interventions and how they're helping to have make every woman and girl count, what it is that UN Women is doing, and how you are working with these other partners to help this work. Our guest this morning, Joshua Musyimi, Program Specialist at Gender Statistics at UN Women. Sylvia, Maina, Regional Gender Statistics and Communication Specialist at UN Women. She'll be stepping out to give space to Doris Munyingi, Program Manager for Women Leadership and Governance at GROOTS Kenya. Our conversation continues on this International Day of the Girl Child, and we're looking at UN Women's strategy, making every woman and girl child count. The theme for this year is Girls' Vision for the Future. Joshua Musyimi, Program Specialist for Gender Statistics at UN Women, stays on with us, and we are now joined by Doris Munyingi, Program Manager for Women Leadership and Governance at GROOTS Kenya. Doris, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well. Good to see you. Karibu sana.
Good to see you.
Happy
too.
International Day of the Girl Child.
Thank you.
Right? So we were talking about the girl child and, the challenges that the girl child faces and the challenges that gender faces. And, we're looking at what that means. What is the root cause? Where the point of the root cause is, poverty being one of them. And then we said, but there are some interventions that have been done on the ground. And one of the organizations that's working on the ground is GROOTS Kenya. So what is it that you do when it comes to matters of gender and particularly women and girls?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. So let me begin by introducing GROOTS Kenya. GROOTS Kenya is an acronym for Grassroots Organizations Operating Together in Sisterhood, and we are a national movement of grassroots women and girls with over 5,000 women groups in this country. And so we are facilitating the engagement of grassroots women in development while shifting the perceptions of how grassroots women and girls are seen. And so some of the things that we are doing to ensure that some of these things come to an end, such as gender-based violence, is number one, we are doing a lot of community engagement. Remember, we are grassroots women-led, meaning sisi ndio tuko kwa ground. We are the real mashinani. And so how do we do this? Number one, we have conversations, real conversations with at different categories. One of the categories is what we call the opinion leaders meetings, and these are meetings with pastors, religious, sheikhs, the religious kind of leaders, politicians. In your village, the way there's that one family leader that is known, when they say something in a meeting, they are heard. So we are having conversations with that category of people to remind them, hey, like gender-based violence is real, and the issues of the girl child are real, and you need to embrace them, and you need to be at the forefront of fighting against them. We're also having conversations with men for women champions who are our allies, because because remember, if we don't have these discussions, we'll kind of be hitting a drum that, is not removing any sound. You need to speak to the people who are actually causing some of this perpetration to be able to understand why it's coming off as a harm. That's one of the things we're doing. Secondly, we are putting up safe spaces and rescue centers. Remember, national non-governmental organizations or movements like us are complementing the work of the government. And so one of the roles of the government is supposed to be setting up rescue centers. It's a form of gender-responsive budgeting. However, because it's a costly process, let me tell you, when it comes to responding to issues of gender-based violence, for example, for a child who has undergone female genital mutilation, it is one of the most costly things that you will go through, from the point of response, to the point of the healthcare, to the point of legal facilities, to the point of psychosocial support. So GROOTS Kenya is putting up safe spaces to be able to support these women and these girls to come on board and, get all this kind of support that we are talking about. You'll also find us doing a lot of legal and policy framework and support. That's one of the ways we are partnering with the UN Women, because remember, to be able to influence policy, you need data.
Yeah.
And so we are actively collecting data at grassroots level, so that when we say that for us at grassroots level that a girl is, vulnerable due to 1, 2, 3 reasons, we actually have data that is proving what we are saying. So these are, in a nutshell, some of the things we are doing. You'll find us also doing economic empowerment program. We all know that when we speak about issues of FGM, early marriages, teenage pregnancies, there is a thin line between that and the relationship with poverty and the relationship with climate resilience. And so how do we build the resilience of grassroots girls to be able to fight climate change, to be able to, be economically empowered to fight this kind of injustices that they are going through. And so last but not least, we are collaborating with the government. Remember, we are not fighters of the government. We are here to do collaboration. So what does that look like? It means that we are training law enforcement officers to ensure that, for example, when a young girl who has undergone female genital mutilation goes to a police station, she has the capacity to find a gender desk where she can speak to that person without fear, without intimidation, and get actually the proper support, rather than previously where, you go to a police station and the first thing they ask you, what are you on? If you wear lashes like me, they are like, you are triggering because of the way you are dressed. If you find me on a normal day in my short dressing, then that will become, you're the one who triggered. So how do we train these police officers and these healthcare providers so that they are sensitive to these matters and they're not asking the wrong questions, but actually they are responding to the cases that are going on when it comes to the injustices with grassroots women and girls at grassroots level.
All right, Doris, first, let me just appreciate that we are 2 Dorises in the room. And secondly, just to add to that not just will they go and speak boldly and feel safe, that they will not be abused in the spaces where they should feel safe. Now, speaking on data, because that's, I think, very important, matters of data, even public participation, data, who did you choose? How did you choose? How did you know? When it comes to university funding, it's always, how do you know who's less needy, who's vulnerable? It's always the question of, who told you she's more vulnerable than I am? Who told you that household needed you? Who told you I wasn't abused and she was? And improving data availability and use, that's where I want to go to, because you've said you're collaborating with different institutions, including UN. And my question is, in 2021, new data on women's economic empowerment did inform policy action. So I'm just curious, because grassroots are vast, and so are their dialects, and so are their cultures, and how they come out is all different. I'm curious on how you actually ensure that you get accurate data. Because there are people who, when talking about women with disability or girls with disability, they're literally locked in. You cannot open that door without calling the elders or the father to come out. So how are you collaborating to ensure there is no bias, absolutely? Because even the girls are not homogeneous. How are you hacking this or acing it, if I use that word?
Thank you. Let me begin by defining for you at GROOTS what a grassroots girl is, who is our target person. And for us, a grassroots girl is actually a girl who comes from a rural or an informal settlement, and they do not have, now at that point, the families they come from do not have a predictable source of income. And so for us, how we are ensuring that we are collecting accurate data is first and foremost, we are leveraging on our numbers. Remember, we have 5,000 women groups. That means if you multiply a group with about 25 people, we're talking about 750,000 persons within the movement. How is this being done? Number one, remember when you talk about data, the first thing that happens is people think, this whole book that has chapters and figures and things that you can't be able to read. We are simplifying the data that we want to collect. So if we are going to talk about issues of, for example, let me give a literal example, issues of gender-based violence, and we are collecting data on the reality of the number of cases that we have. First things first, we will train people we call gender-based violence responders from this pool of groups. And so who these people are is that they are skilled, number one, on simplified data collection tools, that are grassroots level and which are even interpreted to fit their language. An example is we are working on a program in Tana River, in Garissa, in Kiambu, in Kakamega, and in Bungoma, particularly targeting survivors of gender-based violence and at risk of gender-based violence, because those are two categories. A survivor is someone who has already gone through the gender-based violence, but a survivor is, I come and tell you, hey, Doris, today my father said that tomorrow I'm going to undergo FGM. So I have to be categorized as an at risk. So what we are doing is we are simplifying the tools that we are using to collect the data. Remember, we are present at grassroots. So what that means is that we are at the village level, at the community level, at the that local mashinani at think of your village, the farthest place. So that's how we are collecting the data. We simplify what we are looking for. We simplify our tools. We use language that is feasible for them. And now when it comes to presenting, we also present it in a manner that can be interpreted by grassroots level.
Why did you choose these areas?
Why did we choose these areas?
Yes, Bungoma,
The
Garissa, Tana River.
Those 5 specific areas.
Why?
We chose them because, let me now give a story about now the particular program. So the program is called Sigei program, and we have many partners on board. We have the MasterCard Foundation, we have CREW, we have ADSOC, we have CCGD. So we are in CDTD. So we are in the 16 counties, and our basis of identifying the 16 counties, number one, as we've said, is data. Which are the counties, when you look at, for example, the Kenya Demographic Health Survey that was recently launched, which are the counties that we are seeing in this country that are proving that actually there are very high cases of defilement, there are very high cases of FGM, female genital mutilation. And so from the data that is proven, because remember, let's be honest, resources are limited. We can't be able to touch the entire 47 counties comprehensively. However, that's from our side. UN Women, for example, have other partners who are able to go into these other counties. Remember also, the sole responsibility of the government is to offer the services that we are offering as a movement, meaning the county is also complementing in the counties that we are, the county governments and the national government are complementing in the counties that we are actually not present. So it's actually a point of collaboration. You pick from the basket. Which are the counties that you can pick? You move with them. Which are the counties that you can pick? You move with them.
Now, these counties that data has driven you towards, let's say this program was a resounding success. Or what would this success look like?
Oh, wow. Let me tell you what this success would look like. Number one, for us, success would look like the number of gender-based survivors who will have been mapped by the program. They will have gone through skilling, because remember, when you come on board as a gender-based violence survivor, it means already your confidence has been shaken. So we will have the capacity to take you through a life skill, and we can see you, transforming from the fear. One day you came to GROOTS and your hands were shaking. Then the next day we are seeing you having the capacity to speak out. That's success to us, number one. Number two, it's in your perpetrator being caught and justice being brought on board, because remember, we are providing legal services. Number three, it's in the capacity for you to go through actually psychosocial support from the start of the day you enter the rescue center or the shelter to the day you leave. the rescue center. For the ones who are above 18, for us, success will look like actually getting on board and having the capacity to go back to society. Because remember, as a survivor, if today my husband beats me up, for example, it'll be very hard for me to stay in that community because I'll already be earmarked as Doris, the one who the husband beats up. And so how do we cushion you? Exactly. How do we cushion you to have the capacity? And one of the ways we are doing that is that we are economically empowering these women through financial literacy trainings, through access to grants and loans, to be able to bounce back to the economy. So for us, that's what success looks like. The capacity of this girl to go beyond that, because and then now for us, the long-term success for us as a movement is the capacity of this survivor 5-10 years from now to be able to speak to another young girl who maybe will have gone through gender-based violence and tell her, remember, this is not the end of the world, because for us it's about sisterhood, the capacity to work as sisters.
I want to come back to Joshua, if you allow me, because it's very important. We're always talking about, this generation doesn't get that generation, and this generation of women should have guided these girls to understand that this is how, you should look at yourself now. Or some even blame our grandmothers and for creating the girl that you're now trying to empower, who was raised by a Gen X, who was also raised some different way. Now, generation equality. I'm very curious on how this is happening, even in connection to data. Just bring us up to speed, because the girls are a new generation right now. You said all the way to what age? 19?
19.
Yeah?
5 to 18.
Proceed up to even 24.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Those are still girls?
Yeah, because the 19, we are talking about the girls, the teenagers.
All right.
But now, as we go up to 24, we also covering that category.
Yeah,
but now when you look at other demographics, we look at 15 to 49.
All right.
Now, then they transit from the girls and the women. That's why you see the word women and girls, because they move from the women to girls. Thank you. Allow me to start a little bit on the issue of data.
Yes.
Because we are talking about the Making Every Woman and Girl Count program. I would say this is a global flagship program which was designed by UN Women to make data available, gender statistics available for use. In Kenya, we started in 2018. We've been working with GROOTS, for example. The data we produce is now what we share. Like she's mentioned about Kenya Demographic and Health Survey. We've also produced data on other indicators like Time Use Survey, where we see how much of unpaid care work, unpaid care and domestic work.
Yep.
So I would say that we've been able to produce data support, in collaboration with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, produce data that informs policy and programming. What the GROOTS is doing is part of the programming. So the data they are using is now we are the source, and once the data is available, now we make it available to other users who will now make use of it. One of the things we've been working is on the uptake, uptake of the data produced, because this country produces a lot of data.
Yep.
Before even the Women Count program, the Making Every Woman Girl Count, we call it Women Count in short. Before even the inception of this, we had data within the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, but the usage, the analysis, the synthesis, that's what we are now trying to make sure that it's done. So we are reprocessing different data sets that are in existence and making them for use, making them available for use. Some of the things we are looking at is the threats we are talking about, the risks. When you talk about gender-based violence, we have the numbers to show, because earlier you had mentioned about how do you determine it's this one and not this one. So here we are trying to see, and what city asked about the number of counties, why they selected a number of counties. We see some of the counties being flagged up. And I'm happy you mentioned about Bungoma, because from my numbers, Bungoma seems to be on the wrong side of the, because in terms of gender-based violence, both sexual and physical violence, we see Bungoma recording the highest. You know, when you look at teenage pregnancies, Bungoma becomes also up there. So then it becomes an area of intervention because we've provided the evidence that will inform other organizations that are programming those areas to intervene. And therefore, this is what you're saying. So the generation equality here is about trying to see how we can provide information to be able to, show, this analysis and for us to move from, to a generation where now we are thinking equality. Earlier, you had talked about issues of equality and equity. While we talk about equality and equity, these are not the same. We treat them as we are trying to give equity is where we are looking at the commensurate, like you are trying to see what you can do for both the girls and the boys.
It's
and
one
not
for
the
one.
ugali. The ugali you mentioned.
Fairness.
Yes, the fairness. Exactly, the fairness. So we see it's not the equal share, but at least for each one to get the opportunity, to get their slice of ugali, like you said. They do not need to get the same equal size of ugali, but they get some fair share. So that is basically what we are saying.
It's a lot of work that you're doing, and it's a good job that you're doing there. And I think we need to have more of these conversations just to look at the effect of it. Even coming back to see from the work that GROOTS has done, say in Bungoma, what are we seeing? Are we seeing a reversal in trends? Are we seeing an improvement in trends? Especially now that you have statistics that is coming from Joshua. Are we able to track that and see whether it's changing? Joshua Musyimi is a program specialist for gender statistics at UN Women. And Doris Munyingi is a program manager and women leadership and governance at GROOTS Kenya. Earlier we had Sylvia, Maina, regional gender statistics and communication specialist at UN Women. It's the International Day of the Girl Child, the UN Women strategy, making every woman and girl count.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.